underperformed the market, and this is really due to two things. One is we have fairly high management fees compared to what's available from other companies, and First Midwest has a strategy where about a third of the portfolio is hand-picked individual stocks and bonds. And so we're paying fees for an active management philosophy, but that's not really delivering. And there's a large number of people in the investment community would say that trying to beat the market by picking individual stocks and bonds is really very, very difficult, if almost impossible to do consistently. And that because it's an efficient market. And much of the advice for investors is to go with a passive indexed fund and not try to beat the market, but match the market. So our process included both local and national firms. Based on recommendations from the congregation, we selected 3 major national investment firms and 2 local banks with trust departments, and we asked them to respond for a request for proposal concerning fees, investment philosophy, and account customer service. With that, we completed a comparison of the investment results of each firm as if they had managed a $3 million endowment fund for the years 2014 through 2019. And I'll just say up front, 2020 was such a crazy year, I wouldn't do any kind of comparison as to how things performed in 2020, just way too abnormal. So when we did that comparison, and it included Vanguard, Fidelity, and United Church Funds as the national firms, and then of course our current investment firm, First Midwest, and Quad City Bank and Trust. When we did that numerical comparison, we found that the Vanguard managed market index portfolio would have had the highest yield of a 60-40 portfolio. And we chose 60-40 because that's what the 6-year history has been. The investment policy as written by Building and Finance would allow us to go to 70-30, meaning more stocks and fewer fixed income. And one of our recommendations is going to be around that mix. So as I mentioned, Vanguard had a higher return because they were closer to the market and they had lower management fees. We pay about $23,000 a year to First Midwest to manage the account. If we were to go with Vanguard, we would pay about $3,000 a year to manage the account. And so we had a higher yield with Vanguard of about $20,000 a year. So it kind of lines up. It's really about paying fees for higher performance, but not really getting higher performance. And that's not a knock on First Midwest. It's kind of how the stock market works. So our total earnings for this 6-year period, we would have increased our earnings by $120,000 by going with Vanguard. If we increased our asset mix to 70-30, we would have actually increased our yield to $37,000 a year. And as I said earlier, the investment policy written by Buildings and Finance would have allowed us to do that. The next question has to do with customer service and what I'll call malfeasance controls or financial risk. And so there's what customer service is basically, how easy is it for the staff to work with the company? What kind of controls do they offer to keep themselves and to keep us from doing things that are inappropriate with the account? And then finally, the financial risk associated of being with that company rather than company B, let's say. So we would have a dedicated account manager. It does not require us to go onto the web and use passwords to manage the account, but our fees would be lowest when we do that. We would get monthly, quarterly, and annual performance reviews and statements from Vanguard. Vanguard confirms and will monitor that we are following our constitutional processes for withdrawals and additions to the fund. And furthermore, I'll just say that Vanguard is an investor cooperative with $7.1 trillion in assets. Because they're a cooperative, the only way for them to really fail would be for all of those investors to remove their money. It is not like they are taking risky positions in order to juice their profits. When they have a better than expected year, they essentially just lower the fees they charge their investor owners. So the recommendations from the team was that we would move the endowment funds to Vanguard and move it to 70-30, which would be an increase in the amount of equity. The further recommendation is that members of the endowment team would assist building and finance with the funds movement. We would not ask church staff to try and do this. We would be working with the designated account manager that we've been talking with. And then finally, the team recommends that we establish some improved controls and some clearer constitutional processes and agency, which is a term that Dave has helped us understand for the endowment fund. An agency just means that when you have it in fund, you have designated agents or people who are authorized to deal with that fund and make transactions. And in Dave's case, it's members of the board. It's very clearly laid out. It's not one person. It's not managed necessarily singular through a password, but by the fact that those agents are the only one authorized to deal with the investment firm, and the investment firm knows that. So it's not a matter of wondering, well, who can do this or who can't? You lay that out in advance. And we think we could do a little bit better in terms of documenting how that works for First Church. So that is my short presentation. I do have backup data available to answer questions, or if people want to see the numbers that I've talked about. And that concludes my short presentation.
Thanks, Steve. We do have a question right now in the chat from Jeff Newcomb. Would the endowment committee recommend higher than 70% stocks?
Well, that's a good question, Jeff. And I'm gonna try and get to my numerical part of this.
And Jeff, I think when we take a step back and think about church's endowment in general is to exist in perpetuity. So we're not trying to, just like foundations in the community, we're not trying to really outperform the market. Whereas personal investors might want to think putting more in equities at this point is the best idea. That might be the case, but in the long term, we're looking to protect the assets and for perpetuity. Jesus said very clearly, you need people to do mission, but you also need money to do mission too. There are very few UCC churches that have endowment sizes like this congregation's, and I think following within the investment policy guidelines, we work with the Vanguard target funds to help address 70 or 60%.
Yeah, so can everybody see a slide that says First Congregational Church, and is it legible?
No, no, Steve, we don't. We just see the same screen as before.
Okay. Oh, I see what's going on. Yep. Okay, how's that?
That looks great. Yep.
Okay. Okay, now let's see if I can figure out how to manipulate this and get it rolling. Oh boy. Things were going so well. Let's see here. Let's go back a second. Okay.
Hey, Linda, to your question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yep. Okay. So with regard to Jeff's question, the greater the amount of equity, I'm trying to get my cursor over the Vanguard 80-20, the greater the amount of equity in the portfolio, the greater the returns over time. The risk is that you would have some period, some very long extended period of stock market downturn that would cause you to deplete the fund during that downturn. We could absolutely go with 80-20. It would be increasing the yield beyond what the Building and Finance Committee has in the past thought was prudent. For this committee, we decided that we would stick with the existing policy and that could be considered in the future, but for now, we wanted to take advantage of the immediate opportunity to increase the yield within the bounds of the current existing policy.
There's another question here from Linda Shear.
Yeah,
The federal,
go ahead.
oh, sorry, Dave, were you going to read it?
I'll let you read it then.
Okay, the federal interest rates are expected to stay low the next 2 years or more, depending upon inflation. So bonds are not likely to give a good return. But when bond returns go back up, is there flexibility to change our equity bond mix each year?
So any changes to the current equity bond mix are dictated by the church's adopted investment policy. So that's what this committee currently is working within the guidelines. One of the second recommendations from the committee is to really look at the investment policy and the whole operation of the endowment committee and how it can best report, be fiduciary responsible for the funds that the church has. Vanguard currently manages the Day Foundation, just in full disclosure. I don't get any commission for the recommendation coming from the committee. However, our account manager, since we're such large, we have a dedicated person who's kind of our personal investment advisor at Vanguard. He comes here each year, and he also has offered, since he's here locally or even virtually, to give the church and the congregation a yearly in-person or virtual update from someone who's official from Vanguard. And in that, Linda, they talk about those issues. And I would, that's something for the congregation to really consider is, what do we do for the next 2 years with bonds? So we're going to be transferring assets over. But again, the committee is just operating within the investment policy guidelines of the mix and the freedom that we can play with there.
I have a question kind of along those lines. So I guess, how often would you recommend, for transparency reasons, having somebody come in and do a report like this? I mean, since I've been around, having this group established now is going to be great for people that want to know what's going on with the endowment, whereas before nobody really kind of knew. So would just a yearly thing be sufficient, or quarterly? How do you suggest that?
Yeah, we get monthly statements from Vanguard, but you get quarterly performance reports that can be reported back to the council. And then you get an annual report. And within that annual report, the committee can update the congregation on that, or we could see if a representative from Vanguard would like to walk through that. Usually what it is, it's here how you did last year. Here's where you're looking. Here's what you think you're on the right path. Stick with it. And then overall, here's what we think of the market in general. Here's what we think is happening larger globally. Where we're really thinking the market will be heading for the next year. That's a good practice to do anyway from the committee or from an advisor. And in the policy, we do have it stated that we are to receive quarterly and annual updates from our investment managers.
Wonderful. Okay. Linda Shear has another question in the chat. Do we know what mix is used by Moline Foundation or other QC community foundations like Butterworth Center?
So they all, we can find those out. I didn't do a search, but just from what I know of these, not to be completely specific, but they all follow within a 60-40 mix or a 70-30 mix. We do at the foundation follow that. And last year we made a little bit of changes to lessen our exposure to bonds. But that every year there's just a little bit of a change they make.
So Dave, what's your current mix at the Doris and Victor Day?
I believe we are about a 60-40. I can confirm that.
Okay.
And again, that's for the long term. It's a 5-year rolling average is what private foundations determine their distribution rate. So when the market has those big swings, it doesn't affect us too much in terms of protecting our assets to grow in perpetuity.
As far as the connection with the actual church and people in the church, will the endowment committee be the one sole responsible to communicate with Vanguard, or will Jennifer be in on that in the office, or Sarah Ada? since they run those reports for us personally, for like the annual report and whatnot. How is that communication going to happen?
So that's all going to be kind of worked out. So the authorized agents that the church will appoint will be the ones that communicate to Vanguard, but we will give access to the staff for a login, and their only ability will be to either download statements, but they'll have statements emailed to them. It'll be up to those agents. They have to report to Vanguard when it's time for a transfer of funds. They request a transfer of funds. Vanguard decide what's to sell off based on where your monies are, what makes most sense. In terms of, I would think the committee's responsibilities would be, one, to help secure more funds for the endowment, to be proponents of how your money is getting put towards mission. And two, would be to be clear communications to the council based on what you would recommend, but to get regular updates in terms of performance, we're out being in the market, just kind of an overall feel. That's my recommendation. I think that's the essence of the committee. Nancy or Phil might be able to share. Or Steve.
And Audra, I believe the Constitution now currently calls for the Building and Finance Group to form an investment committee to manage the endowment fund and to produce annual reports. And there might even be, you might even read in there to either update or affirm the existing investment policy.
Oh, yes, along with many other things.
The investment policy is written right now, kind of establishes ranges that you can work within. And so that agency could be formulated from that building and finance investment group. As Dave and I have talked about it, the thought is that you need to have a minimum of 3 people, and that those two of those people might be from building and finance, but the third person should be from outside of that group. And kind of the natural thought is that the moderator would be the third person. And that in order to conduct transactions, that it would take 2 of the 3, so that you're not hung up if someone's incapacitated, but essentially you would expect them to act as 3, but the quorum would be 2.
Got it.
Now,
Process
the
to
thinking too,
Steve, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and the thinking is that really our engagement right now with the endowment fund consists of basically establishing from the congregational meeting what the withdrawal is going to be for the year, and then deciding how that's going to be broken up. Currently, we make a draw 4 times a year in equal distributions, I believe, after that meeting. Some of that's related to the fact that it's kind of a manual process. If we wanted to smooth out the church's income with Vanguard, we could actually make that a monthly funds transfer directly into our checking account if we wish to do that. Or we could continue with, basically the pre-programmed quarterly physical checks. They can work either way. The other time that we engage with the endowment fund is when we have gifts or bequests. And when that's cash, that would have to be put into the fund. Again, we expect the agents to manage that. When it's stocks or bonds, currently, those are processed through the church's brokerage account at First Midwest, who liquidates those, and then they go into the endowment fund. The third engagement with the endowment fund is when we have to make a special withdrawal. In that case, again, we would expect the 3 agents to manage that according to church policy. So
okay.
we think that's a better situation today. We kind of use Jennifer as the conduit, and I think that puts her in an awkward situation.
And also just referring to, I guess, in context, this is just the endowment fund. There are other funds within the congregation that we would hope the congregation would like us to empower this committee to move forward with and present the same type of proposal.
Okay. Another question from Linda Shear. Does our church have independent audits of our finances and investments? I can speak on that, but if anybody else would like to.
Go ahead.
Oh, Nancy?
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
No, we do not. And I've been campaigning for that for many years, even during those times when I was substituting as the office manager. It's something we really need to do. And we need to change our controls, I believe, on how some of the money can be dispersed.
I think we had, I think we had what may be called audit light
A review.
sometime in the past decade where we had Augustana come in and do
Yeah, we
a
did.
once over.
We
Is
did.
that correct?
And all they
And-
did was
and
really
actually-
look at the cash.
Yeah, I think an audit is just prudent, and you know, there's a saying, good fences make good neighbors, and I think we do an audit just from the standpoint to make sure that everything is as it should be. It's
And
prudent.
best practices are probably an audit once every 3 or 4 years, and in between, the audits are around $5,000 to $6,000, even for small nonprofits. A review is by an accounting firm, which is a little bit like an audit light, which is around $1,500 to $2,000.
Jeff, did you have a question?
Yeah, we have been trying to find a place for an audit, and the prices we have been quoted were much higher than what Dave was talking about. So we would like to get more specific information about that, because whether we've had an audit or not has come up in building and finance a lot, and
Yes.
we recognize that it needs to happen.
Yes.
But by the same token, we're looking at the finances and we're saying, where is that money going to come from? And we haven't been able to answer that question.
I've seen 10 to 12,000 as a possibility, as much as far as how much it would cost. But I've also heard up to 20 to 30. I think that's probably out of line, but I don't know. I've heard different ranges from different people, and so that's kind of the holdup right now. But we all agree we need to do it. Nancy.
In my experience, you can do several different kinds of audits. You know, for our church, we could do a financial audit. I think that is the thing that we're most concerned about, is our finances and our stability and how the money is being handled. A full-blown audit would go into insurance policies and all kinds of things.
Okay.
So if we
Assets.
so if we just have a financial one, it might not be as expensive.
Okay.
I have another comment to make. I think Steve said that there would be several people from the, I want to say, building and grounds and finance that would oversee this policy. In my mind, it seems to me that we should make sure that we have people that are very knowledgeable about the market and investing, because they're going to be working with this person. And that board changes every 3 years.
Mhm.
So we might consider having like a special subcommittee that would report to that board, but their only concern would be to overlook this investment that we want to make.
Good point, Nancy. Thank you. I want to just get back to the chat because there are several questions and I want to make sure we get all of them answered. It looks like we're at Jeff's. Have we considered socially responsible in investment guidelines?
Yes. So when I showed the previous slide, and maybe I can do that again. Well, I've got to stack up the stuff on my desktop, excuse me. Okay. Let me go to share. Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
It's out of the way. Share screen.
We see it, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you see annual returns compared?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Okay, so this is the same data from the bar chart that I showed a little bit earlier.
All right.
So here's a benchmark to the the stock and bond market for this 6-year period and the returns in total. This is First Midwest. UCF is United Church Funds. And they provide investment firm management for a large number of UCC churches. Their philosophy is that they avoid companies that are not in keeping with what they state would be the UCC values and philosophy. So there are 3,500 stocks in the US stock market, and they do not invest in 500 of those stocks. I did not go through this in great detail with them, but you can imagine that they don't invest in companies that make armaments, companies that make tobacco, companies that make alcohol, companies that make firearms. I did not really want to get into a great deal of detail. If we were to invest with them, we would be actually flipping our return, we lowering it by $20,000.
And that's a decision for the congregation as it relates to Jeff's question about, do we consider ESG investing, social responsibility investing? There is growing trends for people to put funds into these types of funds. They are proving that they are performing better than they have in the past, but they don't necessarily do as well as the market. And that's a decision, a philosophy, and a values decision that people have to make in terms of where they want to invest, where their values are. Sometimes it's not about making the best returns. Sometimes it's about responsibly in good companies. So that was considered, Jeff, to answer your question.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, sure. Sure, Nancy.
The returns were lower and their fees were higher.
The fees were equivalent to First Midwest.
Yeah, the fees were equivalent to what we're being charged now.
Yeah. And part of that's because by the very nature of their investment, they are picking individual stocks and bonds rather than tracking the market. So that kind of hits them. And they do have higher expenses to do that then, and higher fees.
A couple comments in the chat. Linda Shear, the 2 nonprofit boards I was on always passed a motion each year to authorize the financial institutions used for banking and for investments, as well as who had signature authority. Perhaps our policy should require this too. These 2 boards also require 2 signatures for changes or withdrawals above $100, as well as to sign agreements or contracts.
$100.
Wasn't one of our recommendations, excuse me.
Looks like Mary has her hand up way back there. Hello, Mary. Go ahead.
Hello. And I came late to this, so maybe I missed this piece. But even if we went with Vanguard, are you saying we cannot give them guidelines about what types of investments we're interested in?
I couldn't hear her.
The question was, Mary was wondering if we can actually give Vanguard suggestions as to what kind of investments we could be making as far as, being socially responsible and thinking about where we are investing our money.
Yep. So Vanguard has probably what, Steve, 300 different funds that they manage, which are low cost passive funds. They do have one called the FTSE, which is an ESG fund. So the freedom within what we can do with Vanguard is we can select the funds, and they're the agents or the custodians of our assets. If we choose to use a fund like a mix that we're proposing, or throwing in, we could portion some of our 10% of our investments into a social responsibility fund. We have freedom to do that as long as it follows within our investment policy. We tell Vanguard what our policy is; they follow what we would like. In the sense of, so if that's the decision of the congregation, they'd like to see some proposal that includes some investments in a specific fund that's designed for social responsibility, that's fine. But based on our task to find a recommendation that would provide the best, optimize the best for the funds to exist in perpetuity, this is what the committee's recommending to the congregation.
So, yeah, thank you, Mary. So it sounds like the team needs to do a little bit of research as to what performance of the Vanguard ESG fund would look like. And so we'll take that on.
Pastor Michael has here in the comments, my experience with a church-related account at Vanguard is that agent turnover comes very quickly, and occasionally we would have difficulty running down the agent to ask for us. I suggest keeping agents for 2 or 3 years at a time, maybe with a rotation to act for us.
Those are the internal agents, Michael? Okay, internally.
I think he's,
Sure.
I think he's going to unmute. There we go.
The contact people for the church.
Okay,
So they'd say, well, we need to talk to so-and-so. And then
Yeah.
that was a little bit pre-internet, and sometimes it was hard to run so-and-so down.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes along the lines also as to what Nancy was saying earlier about just our group, our church leadership. There's so much rotation here to have a stable group, as you guys are, to take this on. I think will be very beneficial as, you know, moderators come and go, BNF comes and goes. So I think that's really important to consider as we move forward.
Phil's got his hand up.
Oh, there you are, Phil. Go for it. Unmute yourself, please.
Phil or Bill?
Phil with a PH or an F. No,
All right, how's that?
we can hear you.
All of those things have to be done in the format of bylaws. And all of those, the rotation in a committee should be done so that there is never a brand new board. In other words, if it's 3, initially somebody will serve a 3-year term, somebody a 2-year term, and somebody a 1-year term, so that there's always continuity and somebody, so to speak, knows the ropes about, you know, how high you have to stand and whatever, how many, but in all the other decisions regarding signing contracts, I believe our church constitution and the bylaws provide who is signatory. Typically, on any matter of any significance, the presiding officer would be that person. And if that person is not available, then that would pass to the second in line. And it's not a lot different from our own president and vice president of the United States. You know, I can't remember, one of the presidents had to have surgery, Bush. His vice president was imbued with his powers for 3 hours or something, some kind of and you know, if we haven't done that thoroughly, that kind of work is not difficult. Model bylaws are available. Or, you know, you get some grunt like me to concoct what we deem appropriate.
So Phil, to kind of speak on that, in regards to the turnover with boards and committees, there is always somebody that's on there that has been, at least since I've been involved with the nominations committee for, I don't know, 8 years now. We've always had at least somebody on every board. So that's still in place. It's, I guess, a question of how informed is that person, even after serving maybe just 1 or 2 years, to kind of preside over that group and get them in a place to move forward. So, and then sometimes it's hard to fill the boards and committees. And so it's, I guess it's just the personal investment time of each individual on the team to know what's kind of in place. I think even as moderator, this is my first time being moderator. We have the mod squad. I can ask them questions, but I've never been moderator before. So and nobody's been a moderator in a pandemic. So there's that too. But I think that the system is in place, but how efficient is it? You know, how effective is it with transfer?
How many audits is it?
always a problem, and we're going to have to react to that. If we need, we're talking about an investment agency committee.
Mhm.
We must be sure that the people who serve on that at least have some basic idea of what their
Absolutely.
mission is.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are people who do that sort of thing with more familiarity than others.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yep.
I mean,
Did Don have a question, Linda?
and then those people will
I
have
think it got answered. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I just saw him lean forward.
some people have to like, they'll have to run to catch up to speed, may have to learn something they've never known before.
Mhm.
I know that if I needed to play the flute, that Audra would teach me, or at least attempt to do so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Dave put in the chat a very good resource, and if I just like to direct you all to that in case you aren't following the actual chat. Down at the bottom of your screen, a bar kind of engages. You see a green button that says share screen. To the left of it is the chat. If you click there, Dave has provided us with a link. And so if you click on that link, it'll open it in another window on your computer, and you can bookmark that to look at it later, or just make sure that you have that to kind of look at further details. Because once this is over, you can't go back in and click on that. So I just want to make sure everybody has access to that if they are interested.
It's there.
Say it again.
It's there. And it was somebody, it's very much like somebody's question. Perhaps it was his.
Well, Phil, I'm just pointing it out so that if anybody wants to actually click on it. Yep. So, all right. Are there any other? Oh, I do have another chat here. Linda, so Vanguard would allow our church to put money in more than one fund, question mark. For example, 10% into the socially responsible fund if we agree to returns. Just clarifying that.
Yes, subject to fund minimums, which I don't think we would have a problem with. Most of their funds require a minimum of $3,000. So it would complicate the management, our management of the fund, but we could divvy it up between different funds. Again, coming to a consensus on that might be the hardest part.
I think so.
But it's doable. And I note that Don keeps winking in and out like the Cheshire cat.
It's those backgrounds.
He's leaning back in his chair and I have a background, so that makes it less stable.
Well, folks, it is about 9:45. I don't want to rush this conversation at all and like cut anybody off, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of the time and allow you guys time to get ready for worship here at 10 o'clock. Are there any final just quick questions that the committee can answer that you would like to hear verbally rather than communicating through an email? And go ahead and you can just, I think, speak. Nobody?
Well,
I appreciate-
the signatories and their term of office is yet to be determined. They can be part of the endowment committee or whomever the church decides they want to give that power to. But indeed, those specific people and their term of office can be determined later. That's what we're saying.
Okay, thank you. Tom Woodburn, you have your hand raised.
What email can I use to send a question?
If you'd like, you could send it to me and I could forward it to the group. I don't know if that might be easier instead of typing in 5 email addresses. It's bailey.audra@fccmoline.org.
That sounds fine. Thank you.
All right.
Well, thanks, everybody. This was enlightening. And I know there was a lot of work to prepare just to get up to this point. And we really appreciate having a question answer period instead of just a printed report to say, here's what we decided, or here's what we found out so far. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much to our endowment group for taking this on. I know the job is not done, but you've made really good progress. I do want to mention that I am recording this. So if you know of individuals that wanted to attend this morning that perhaps they couldn't, this is going to be available, I think, on the church website. We're going to be able to put a link on there so that could be shared for those individuals. So thank you all for coming. Bill and Nancy Henning, I have a phone date with you at 11:15. Yes, okay, and I'll be calling from a 332 number that you won't recognize. All right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your Valentine's
I
Day.
had a question.
Oh, yeah.
Just a generic one about the adult forum. Instead of going to my email and opening the bridge and finding the link for the Zoom adult forum, I was trying to find it on the website, but the bridge isn't posted that I can find, only the bulletin.